So today what we've done is we went and picked up the parts for the brake job on this 2008 Dodge Ram 1500 SLT. We just needed rotors for the front of it and brake pads all the way around it. Front rotors were grooved too bad and had already touched metal on metal and gotten pretty bad where they couldn't even be turned. So we had to buy new brake rotors for this. So we'll be changing out the brake rotors on the front today. But instead of spending like $30-something on a brake bleeding tool, which basically is what I'm making today, so I can go ahead and bleed the brakes once I get them on and work in order, went and bought me a bottle small enough to where you can keep it pretty full of brake fluid without breaking the bank, without having to pour a gallon into it like if you'd have to do with a 2-liter bottle or a gallon jug. But you can use those, you just have to pour more brake fluid in it. So the hose is, because you want the hose, this brake fluid hose, or this plastic hose, when it goes down in the bottle, you want it to be resting at the bottom of the bottle and always picking up new fresh brake fluid into this from this reservoir. So that's what we're doing here now. And I've taken the label off the front of the bottle. I've picked one small enough but with a nice flat bottom to it. That way it doesn't knock over easy. And I'm adjusting or getting ready to drill out a hole for my cap. Now I don't want it to be the same size as this rubber hose, this clear plastic rubber hose that I'm using, but I want it because I want it to fit snug so there's no air leaking around this when I put it through this cap. You'll see what I'm doing when I do that. First I want to take a measurement to know how far down into the bottle my hose has got to go. From the top of the lid, it'll mark to come to right there. So that's how long I need it to be going down in there. And I'm going to put a little pilot hole right here. I'm going to start it with a little dimple. You can do this with a scribe, a metal punch, a small drill bit, anything you choose, it'll work for a small pilot, just to get a drill bit started. Then next you want to take a drill bit. It's about a 1/4 inch inside diameter, and you want to work your way out with it. See, I'm using a reverse one, a left-handed thread drill bit, and it's just because when I go through the lid of this, I want it to be not burred up as much as possible. A little trick you can use on that, even in metal, wood, take a reverse drill bit and turn it in the regular forward gear and drill through with it like that. That'll keep the edges from burring up. And let's start here in my hole. See how clean that hole is? It didn't burr up real bad. Or in the inside. We'll start from here. And we'll turn it in the other direction now. So I'm going to whittle it out a little. Have to whittle this hole out. You're basically just whittling the hole out to where it fits. The pipe fits in it well. Time to change drill bit size. You can stop there, pause. You can use whatever kind of drill bits that you want to choose to use to drill out the cap. I'm just using the drill bits that I commonly use because they work best for me. I've used them in the past. So, but you can use a flat wood bit or a different regular right hand bit. You just want to get that hole carved out enough to where the rubber hose will fit down through the lid and fit in through there snug. Okay. Hole drilled out and smoothed out. See, both sides, but you want it to fit really snug. If you'll look at that, you'll see the way it tapers in when you push it through. And you want that really good and snug in there so it doesn't have any air leak in between it. And then pull it up to the area where you've got your hose marked as your maximum depth through the bottle. And there we go. Now, we want to put a small breather hole right here. And what that'll end up doing is give you a little pressure release from the top half of the empty side of the bottle. And the hose that will be connected to the brake bleeder will be siphoning the liquid, the brake fluid, out of the bottom of the bottle. And instead of squeezing the bottle compact, because there's no way for air to escape through it, it'll bubble up through there and it'll let air pressure out through the top. So, but alright. And our hose wasn't quite long enough when we got it, but we kind of pieced it together from a couple of different things, so I'm having to use an actual little hose coupling barb. So let's push these two sections together just to make it long enough. So we got these little clamps here that fit around it to hold them in place, and it just clamps on, clips in, and holds everything in place around the edges of it, anywhere there's a fitting. But you can use zip ties. You can use a smaller zip tie that fits around it and use zip ties to pull it tight. You just want it to fit snug. And when you put it on the back side, this hose on the back side of the brake bleeder, the little knob that the brake bleeder is on. Let me pause this. Let's take a small drill bit. Take a tiny drill bit. Take a tiny drill bit. And just take a spot over to the side of it. And drill your hole right through it. And be careful. Of course, just wear eye protection. And not get too close to the outside edge. Make sure you don't drill a hole into your hose on the inside. But just drill you a little hole that way some air can escape out of it, so it doesn't collapse the bottle when it starts pulling pressure off of that inside the bottle. Alright, now we're going to get down to taking the wheels off, and taking all the brake calipers loose, taking the rotor off, and reassembling it with new rotor, cleaning everything off real well, and putting the brake pads back in. Alright, let's do that now.
Don't cuss.
Don't cuss? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were. So, now we're taking the adjuster bolts out of the brake calipers from the brake caliper bracket. So the brake caliper bracket basically just holds the brake calipers. And it also holds the brake calipers and the rotor in line with one another there. When you break this loose, these two bolts loose, it's best to pack them with silicone when you go back in with the bolt, and check and make sure that the piston in it is good. See here, come here and look. See, this is ran on a piston, and it's got a dust cover, and it fits in here. I'll show you. See this piston? Once I take this caliper off, this piston and everything will come out, and I'll show you what you have to put some silicone in there to make sure it's sliding right, because if it catches and it hangs up, it won't act right. It'll make your brakes squeal and sound, that skipping sound that you get. It usually comes from these being stuck, these pistons being stuck in there. But now let's take these bolts loose, and then we'll go from there. So these are made where you have to take the bracket, the caliper bracket that holds the caliper in place off the spindle.
What two ratchets did you use to?
You have to take it off as well. There's two bolts that holds the bracket the caliber bracket on.
The size of the bolts.
2 13/16. And you get them spun off. You got to take them off anyway to put a new rotor on. But on some models, they make it to where you can take the brake caliber off without having to take the caliber bracket off. This isn't one of them. Yeah, what we'll do, since we're going to leave the brake lines hooked in, I usually like to take and zip tie it up there, hanging off of that. Pop the brakes out. Usually like to take the bracket after I got it off. Check that out. Make sure your line's not kinked. Set it up there. Like I said, I usually like to zip tie it in place. Spin these bolts back in real quick. I put a little liquid wrench on. Where they're kind of rusty, because these bolts, they see the back side of it. See how they rust? A little bit of grease actually works good, but I'm just going to use this liquid wrench. That's what I got in my hand handy when you're trying to do this professionally for a living. We're just trying to get it done on our own vehicle, which a lot of us have to do, especially nowadays. And the cost of everything is just outrageous. You buy the cost of parts, you figure that into it. If you can do these jobs yourself, you save some pretty good money. I mean, you know, I know that mechanics got to eat too, and for those bigger jobs that you can't handle, you can take it to the mechanic and let them and their families eat off of those times. But you know, to make do, we got to make do. You know, and off comes our rotor. Set the old rotor out of the way. Now, that might just have enough thickness on it that we could take it and get it resurfaced. Some places, mostly old school parts houses, have rotor resurfacing machines where they can resurface a rotor. Not a lot of the new ones have it. They just want to sell you a new one. But you know, for the price that it costs to get one resurfaced, might look around at some of these older shops, some of these older specialty shops, and see what they do in the way of, you know, brake rotor resurfacing. I'll tell you, it save you a chunk of change. They had that was $80-something, and that was for a 253 millimeter rotor. If you had to get a 236 millimeter rotor, it's like $336. Just keep that in mind. Some of the parts, I will actually ask what they have in the way of the commercial side and see if I can't buy a few more of them. And I might have to spend like $1 or $2 more than what I was going to spend on just 2 of them, 3 or 4 of them, and get several of them in a larger size box. And it's only a couple dollars more, which you end up saving you money, and you've got extra for later on in the future if you ever need it. Stuff like hose clamps, you know, screws, bolts, nuts, stuff like that that are specific to something that you might have as a vehicle. You know, you can check the commercial side at a lot of these parts houses, and they'll, you know, just tell them you want to buy on the commercial, off the commercial side, and what do they have in the way of, you know, those kind of package deals. You'd be surprised. You know, there's garages that are out here doing this for a living that, you know, buy parts from these parts houses a lot. They get a discount off of the top as well. So they've got a better price that they can offer people on these parts. So don't ever let them tell you they can't give you a better deal on it, because I've seen them give that better deal. So I took the old rotor off. These rotors, they're just kind of hanging on there. What keeps the rotor in place is the caliper bracket, and the caliper and the brake shoes and the brake shoe, or brake pads and brake pad clips, which are right here. Let's take these clips, you pop them in. They go right here. They go in a certain way. It's easier to clip them onto the brake pad and set the brake pad in. See? But did you see where they go in at? They're going right here. See this? I showed you a second ago. But I got to take that off the brake caliper. It's just hanging up there, or the brake rotor and the brake caliper bracket. It's just sitting up there. That's it, bro. Come off there. There we go. The way the rotor had it sitting up against it. You want to try to keep your hands off this. They got two different kinds of brake rotors. One is painted, and one is one's paint and one's a polymer. Of course, the polymer is a little better, but get that on backwards. Yeah, get it on backwards because you got to stick them in from the inside. Hold on, Jess. You have to slide it in from the inside. You get these brackets on the end. They got to face a certain way, and those brackets hold them out here. And when they push in, those springs spring back and pull them back out. That's the way it's supposed to work. Take more of these out of there. Outside to the outside. These are sliding back. See how the clips are arranged? They hold them in place, so when the brake caliper squeeze, it springs them back out. Now, I'm going to get one of this top bolt lined up. Put a little pressure on it. Move it around till you find the hole. I'm just holding that in place so I can take this down. Start messing with this. Alright. I was tightening this back top bracket bolt up because I didn't take this loose. This next part, you can either take the line loose and take and have your brake fluid drain out and then have to bleed the brake fluid. Or you can take a C-clamp and take one of the old pads. Pop these clips off. Drop the metal side up there on them cups. You want to make sure that where you're sticking the C-clamp, that there's not any thing mounted on the back of the caliper. They can just push a little aside, back a little bit at a time through this gap right here. Now, they make tools to do all these things with, but for those of you that don't have the money to spend on a tool, you can save a few dollars by actually doing it this way. And you got to keep an eye on your brake line, because you don't want it to blow out. So you got to push these cups back even as you can and slow, and you got to watch your brake line. So it takes a few minutes doing it this way. But as long as you're careful, you pay attention to what you're doing, everything will turn out alright. And your cups will go back into the caliper. And you've not had to take apart the brake line. Alright. As I was doing that, I wanted to make sure that this inside rubber seal that the caliper cups rest in, that it wasn't cut, nicked, or damaged, and that there's no busts or breaks in this hose, because we're forcing fluid back up in this bottom section of this brake hose is rubber. So you don't want to bust that or expand it. Oh, that's where I rubbed my hand on it, but grease on it. But anyway. Now, I've got to set this inside that with those brake pads set in so this fits together. Means I've got to do some more taking apart here. You didn't have to film that part. After you position the pads in the bracket into the caliper, you'll see that they'll be sitting in there this way. You want to line up these two piston holes that hold this with the bracket. You want to start these screws, or these bolts. You just want to start them in there. And so it will line up everything with the bracket and the caliper. Just hand tighten them in there. Now we get to set this back onto this rotor. Whew. Once you get that on there, this is a beast. I'm not going to tell you no stories. It's heavy. You want to push your rotor in there, and then start you one bolt at the top. Alright, let's start it. You want to take your ratchet and your socket. Okay. That's the same 13/16 socket on your ratchet. And you tighten her up a little, not all the way, because you still have to put the bottom bolt in. You want to be able to move this around at the bottom some. But you want it to line up still, so all you have to do is lift it out or down. And the bolt slides right in. It's in. And on to tighten that. Then, since I've put some pretty greasy fingerprints all over this, we're going to take our brake cleaner and we're going to spray it back off one good last time. The way I done all the other stuff to start with, I sprayed all this off with brake cleaner after I got the old rotor off sitting right there. Sometimes the brake cleaner didn't get it all off. You end up like this. Was wearing my gloves to keep my hands clean, to keep them off of this at some point. Now for this next thing, you want to be in a well ventilated area. You want to wear a respirator when at all possible. And be very careful. Keep this out of your eyes, mouth, hands, off your skin if possible. And we're going to go through that now. We'll come back in a second. Okay. No. Now we're going to take our reservoir jug. We're going to fill it full of brake fluid. Or not fill it, but pour it. Give me that other canister of this brake fluid. Here. Put the reservoir up to, so when you're pumping your brakes, it doesn't run out. About right there is good. Check it after each time, but this will probably be enough to do both sides, because you're not really going to let, I imagine, a whole lot of air in. You didn't let a whole lot of air in if you done it the way I just showed, because you pushed it back in like that. And now you take this hose and you want to hook it to your brake bleeder. Your brake bleeder is under this little rubber cap. Pull it off. And it fits on there pretty snug, you see that? Then you want to take a wrench. You want to loosen this brake bleeder up with a small wrench. Alright, you want to take a 7/16 wrench and you want to place on this brake bleeder, and you want to crack it open with it. And it might be a little snug, so you just want to get it started loose first. And then you want to have someone, yourself, because with this brake bleeder system, you won't need anybody out here. Crack it open. So you'll see the old fluid start to leak out, drain out. Make sure it's draining out of there pretty good. Then you'll get in the vehicle. Hold this up here. I didn't put my zip tie on there, but don't squeeze it. Just hold it up on the nipple. See what I'm saying? And we're gonna pump our brake. You'll see it should start bubbling. Is it bubbling? Is all the fluid pumping out?
Yep.
Is anything sucking back up through it? Is there any air bubbles come out in this?
Yeah. Yeah. You got one right there.
Huh?
You got one right there.
Pause it. When you crack the bleeder valve and you start draining it, you always want to make sure your reservoir is full. Try to see where the lines are on this. Get over here and take a peek where they're at. You're probably going to have some really nasty fluid. Let me right here. Probably going to have some really nasty fluid in there. Oh yeah. So you want to keep this full. And what it's going to do, that bleeder is actually going to pull clean fluid out of the bottom of the reservoir and pump it through the top. Pump the dirty back out to start with. Got it up on jacks. Ain't gonna be too bad. You want to make sure it's up. Oop, wrong good. Wrong good. Alright. After we get that, we pump our brakes. We top the fluid back off. And we close the valve. Let me close. You'll close that valve up nice and tight after you pump it. And what it'll do is it'll drain all the fluid out of the hose. It'll drain all that brake fluid. It'll fill the entire line up. And you'll start seeing bubbles come out down here, push out in the bottom. And see the old fluid's on the top. And the new fluid pulled from the bottom from the hose. Yeah, you want to make sure that you don't get any of this brake fluid all over anything. It's very corrosive. It'll eat your paint. It's corrosive. Some nasty stuff. If you want to keep your paint intact, keep it off your paint. Got an awesome pedal. Ugh. Can't even push it to the floor. Okay, now that concludes how you do the fronts. It's the same on both sides. It's just a repeat process. The next video will be us doing the back brakes. We'll be repeating the same process. If I want to give y'all a thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos. And that's it. We'll see y'all.